Your clicker's here. Do you want me to leave it here? Has everybody got a seat? Do we need some more chairs? Let's see. Oh, there's one seat in the front row here. Raise your hand if you have an extra seat next to you. And there's a seat there and a seat here. Like, if we can get everyone seated, that would be amazing. Ah, perfetto. Hello, 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 and welcome. My name is Natalie Cash. I am the executive media producer at the Wildlife Conservation Society, and I'm also a fellow here at the Explorers Club, along with fellow board member Paul Tangy, or say fellow member and board member Paul Tangy. I'm also co-chair of the Public Lectures Committee, and we have Katie Losi in the audience tonight somewhere, who's also on your Public Lectures Committee. Katie? There she is. Hey, Katie. So the Public Lectures series has a very rich history dating back more than a century to 1920. It's a time-honored club tradition that stems from the very informal, small-scale discussions held by legendary explorers and club members of the early 20th century. The lectures have since gone on to be a Monday night staple here and a platform from which explorers of all types can share their discoveries with their peers and the general public. So how many of you have been to the club before? Oh, that's a sizable number. And anybody here who is their first time? Oh, welcome, welcome, welcome. The building has tremendous energy, tremendous history from the stories that have been told from this podium alone, like just last month, or earlier this month, we're still in June, we had the World Oceans Week with Sylvia Earle and David Gruber, who's leading the Project SETI to determine what the sperm whales are saying to each other. The stories that have been told here from this podium, to the photographs shown, the maps drawn, and amazing films screened, of course, and the flag expeditions that have returned over the past 120 years. As a matter of fact, we're here in the Clark Room, and here on the wall you can see hanging above us is Matthew Henson's sledge. And now Matthew Henson was a celebrated member of the club who, along with two-time club president Robert Peary and 4 Inuit guides, Uta, Ikwena, Ukwea, and Siglu, were the very first to reach the North Pole on April 6, 1909, 115 years ago this year. So whether it's your first time or your 500th, and whether you're joining us in the room or you're joining us online, you're in for a very special treat this evening with a special presentation from a very wonderful and multi-talented member. And I first met Thomas Rowell in China 5 years ago through fellow member Nancy Rosenthal's New York Wild Film Festival. It was part of her partnership with NYU Shanghai, and Thomas was there with his very beautiful and lyrical film, The King's Keeper. The King's Keeper was this film that told the story of Prahlad Rajavav. He was a mahout who retired from working with circus elephants and went to caring for them at the Wildlife SOS Elephant Conservation and Care Center in Mathura, India. And this film looked at the special relationship that he developed with Gajraj, who was a 70-year-old bull elephant who arrived at the center after being chained for 51 years. And yeah, the name Gajraj is a portmanteau of the Hindi Gaja for elephant and Raja meaning king, hence Gajraj, or king of the elephants. And the way that this film just unfolded poetically, we just realized that we screened it actually here in New York at the One Hotel in Brooklyn 5 years ago from tonight. But it was just beautiful and poetic and just a testament to your immense skill as a storyteller and a film to be felt as much as it was to be seen. Thomas is a photographer, a multidisciplinary storyteller, a National Geographic explorer, as well as an Explorers Club member. He's studied theater directing at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts and has since held residencies in dance and mask at the Wall Center in Senegal and directing at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Close to my own heart, he's also a fellow shoemaker, which does not get enough credit or notice, and a very dear friend. But why we're here is last year, Thomas undertook a flag expedition to document the flora and fauna of Argentina's Misiones province and the people that serve to protect it. Now, Misiones holds 1% of Argentina's landmass, but over 52% of its biodiversity. So it's a very special place, and what emerges is a portrait of a very special place, both portraits literally infused with the soul of the place. So to tell you a little bit more about that, it is my great pleasure to welcome back to the Explorers Club, Thomas Rowell.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. All right. I'm going to make this as awkward as possible here in the beginning. So, for many months of 2023, I was crawling on my hands and my knees in Misiones, Argentina, and I was doing that with flag number 226. Thank you. Now, as she said, it really is, it's such an honor to carry a flag. This was my first flag expedition, so it really meant a lot to me to carry it along. I want to thank everybody from the club for this opportunity, and I'm here to give it back. Thank you very much.
Can you get one of Thomas alone with this picture? Felix, can you get one of Thomas alone? I'm just going to tell you a little bit about flags. So flags go out, and unless flags can also be retired. Yeah, let the audience get some photographs too. Yeah, do the pose. Yeah, you can tell them a little bit.
Thank you. So, I could not have done any of this. I wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for this group of people. They have supported me in every way imaginable, and I thank them with everything that I have. Thank you. The other group that made this project very different is the National Geographic Society. They supported me in kind with some cameras. This project would look very different with some trail cameras, which you'll see video from. This project would look very different without their help, and so thank you to the National Geographic Society as well. So this is my first time. Everything all good? Oh, hey. Hey, Andre. Good to see you guys. This is my first time speaking here, and I just want to take the opportunity to take it back all the way to the beginning and introduce you a little bit to myself, to my work, how I got to be in this place, how I got to be here in Misiones with these flags from these storied institutions. Here I am, a serial exhibitionist even from the beginning. I grew up in the mountains of North Carolina, and it was everything to me. I love it there to this day. I think one of the things that I still love about this place is the wildlife there. I have always loved animals and been drawn. I've had every animal that I could catch as a kid: snakes, turtles, lizards, anything I could catch. Here I am on my 7th birthday, and I am so stoked, not because my friends are here to visit, but because my mom has put 7 snakes, or lizards, newts, and salamanders on my cake. And I have to say that this deep love that I had, the curiosity that I had, I was incredibly lucky to have a family member, my aunt, who is a research scientist that works at the San Diego Zoo. She's worked there for about 45 years now almost. And she not only gave me incredible opportunities as a kid, but deepened and strengthened my curiosity to this day. So I, again, is someone that I wouldn't be standing here without. And I took a long and a windy road from here. Like Natalie said, I studied theater, I studied storytelling. I really thought that was the path I wanted to go. And long, windy path, I'll tell you over a beer sometime. I ultimately ended up on the front lines of human-animal conflict. Could we take the blinds down? I think it'll help the photos a little bit. I ultimately ended up here on the front lines of human-animal conflict around the world, and I've been really lucky to work with some amazing organizations. Like this one's I was taken with Wildlife SOS in India. They're a rescue and rehabilitation organization. I've worked with some of the last remaining northern white rhino. Worked with sloth bear, done several projects with sloth bear in India as well, and Asian elephants. And like she mentioned, this is a still, this is a photograph, but associated with the film that I made on Gajraj and Prahlad. This is the kind of story that I'm always looking for. What I'm really ultimately after is stories of reciprocity, stories of love, stories of connection between ourselves and the natural world, and specifically through animals. That's how I connect to the natural world. So that's what I am looking for. But in order to work in a lot of these places, and in order to be with some of these incredible animals, I have to spend a lot of time in places like this. And if any of you have ever been on safari or been into a wildlife reserve, or you've probably seen a scene a lot like this. This has become more and more common around the world, especially with the rise of social media and all of that. And I don't want this to ever get twisted. This animal has certainly become accustomed to people, but that is by no means comfortable. So I think we really need to start really thinking about how we're interacting with these animals and how I, as a storyteller, portray them. And so all of this work was before the pandemic, before everything kind of shut down. And when it did, I had a lot of time alone. And I was able to take that time, lucky enough to take that time and move towards a long-term goal of creating camera traps, like the one that you engaged with out there. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what these are and how they work, but what I want to say here, what's really important to me about them is that they are alone in the forest with the animal. So the animal is left alone to act naturally in their natural habitat without my influence. I got a couple dozen photos of this whistle pig, what we call locally a whistle pig, groundhog. And he's just walking around his den, totally unbothered by the click of the camera or the flash of the light. It really depends on the species, but this is what matters to me. This is something that I am now going after when it comes to strict wildlife photography. I want to see them acting naturally. And so that's what brings us to today. I was coming out of the pandemic, I was so amped to try and take this technology, try and take this practice out into a bigger arena, into a bigger field than my backyard, where I'm still doing this work today. And it ultimately led me to this. There are 36 biodiversity hotspots in the world. They're spread out all over the world there in color that you can see. And these places are truly incredible in the truest sense of that word. They have more than 50% of the world's plant species as endemics. For those of you that don't know, an endemic is a plant or an animal that only exists in that place. So they have more than 50% of the world's plant species as endemics. They have 43 of the world's bird, mammal, reptile, and amphibian species as endemics. And then crucially, for all of us in this room, they provide 35% of the ecosystem services that we rely on. And they do all of this on 2.5% of our surface, land surface. It is impossible for me to overstate how important these places are, not just for the 2.1 billion people that live inside of a hotspot, but for every single person in this room. So in order to qualify as a biodiversity hotspot, it has to have at least 1,500 vascular plants as endemics. That is a lot, just to put that in context. And unfortunately, it has to have lost 70% of its original forest cover. So that's what makes it a biodiversity hotspot, a place that is both rich with life, but at a high risk for destruction. A hotspot, in other words, is completely irreplaceable. So we're going to talk about one hotspot tonight, the Atlantic Forest hotspot. And this historically went from Brazil all the way down Uruguay, Paraguay, and some of Argentina. But like all the other hotspots, it's lost quite a bit of coverage. And today, it has less than 8% of its original coverage. And that is largely focused here. My water. A lot of that is focused here in this province, Misiones. Misiones is the far northeastern corner of Argentina. And like Natalie said at the beginning, it has 1% of the land mass of Argentina, yet they have 52% of the biodiversity of the country. They are also some of the last remaining Atlantic forest, contiguous Atlantic forest in that biodiversity hotspot. And there's one other fact I need to think of really quick. Misiones is 50% of Misiones is still forested, but only 50% of that is protected. And that's what this looks like. So the spots in green is protected. Those are provincial parks or national parks. And everything else, I'll just go back really quick. Everything else is privately owned or owned by industry. So a lot of that looks like this. This is eucalyptus here on the bottom left and pine in the back. And everything on the right is the original forest. So it's being cut up at a pretty phenomenal rate. So I was invited down there, welcomed down there by a group of scientists who have been doing population studies, working with the wildlife down there to see what the state of things are. And they wanted me to come down because they're doing work in between all of those protected lands, in what they're calling a wildlife corridor, though that's on paper. It's not a physical corridor that we'll talk about a little bit later. So everything that's outlined there in pink or blue, that is private land. The stuff that's gray is what's protected. And so what they're doing, their hope is working one-on-one with the landowners on the ground. They can connect those spaces and hopefully allow free movement for wildlife. And they're doing that in part by protecting the landscape as it is, incentivizing people to protect that landscape. So, like I said, they welcomed me down, and they very enthusiastically took me into the field. So here we are going out into the forest of Misiones, and some of these parks, it doesn't function the way that national or state parks function around here. There's not really many ways in. You kind of got to go on the road. And there's not very many places that you as a tourist can go. There are some, but they're very limited. So we spend a lot of time in field stations like this. This is a private one where we're welcomed by private park guards or state park guards. And they generally are enthusiastic about the animals that they have and so excited to tell you, oh yeah, we saw a jaguar last week, and look at this cast I got from last year. So we know that animals are there, for sure. It is 5-star luxury accommodations. Very nice. And just to be clear, this is, but I do have to say, I don't want to make fun of it too much because it's very generous that they make space for people like me, for researchers to come in and work there. So, despite. So this is a physical wildlife corridor. Again, these are amazing. These are well worth the time and energy that goes into them, but this is not really what I'm there to work on. What we're working on is something on paper. And so generally what we're doing is getting to a space and then walking around. We're looking for a place where animals might be. Because the first thing that I was there to do was set up these camera traps, trying to document the wildlife that these people are working with and help them with those one-on-one interactions with their landowners. This is a vine called a monkey's ladder, by the way. It's about that big around. Really amazing. So this is another example of a physical wildlife corridor. We went and checked this out to see, all right, is there any sign of an animal in this place, walking around this place? And there's some, but it's not quite exciting enough for me. What I'm looking for is a funnel, I want to see an animal's, a trail in the forest and a place where they can't really go on either side. If I'm going to spend the time to set up the camera, I want to know for sure that there's going to be an animal going by. I'm looking for stuff like this, fresh tracks. These are from ocelot. Or this is a puma. And these tracks up there in the upper left, if you haven't seen it. So these tracks have been laid within 24 hours. I know almost without a shadow of a doubt that we're good to go here. But of course, we want to gather as much evidence as we can. This is a place where a puma has scratched the dirt a little bit and marked their territory. So if you're paying attention, if you're kind of looking at the ground, you could miss it, but if you're paying attention, this is a great sign that a puma is there. And if you have any doubt, you can get on your hands and your knees, put your nose on the ground, and you can be 100% sure that a cat was there. But this is also great evidence, recent evidence of an animal coming by. But far and away, the best thing that I can do to assure that I'm in the right location is to set up a field camera, like the ones that were given to me by the society. And this trap was set up. This trap was set up for about 3 months as research. And I got about 17 videos of puma and jaguar, along with a host of other. I have way too many videos to show you tonight. But one that I did want to show you is this coati. This is a relative of the raccoon. Beautiful. And I couldn't leave this one on the table. Yeah. So I got to this location, checked that camera trap, and I was like, yes, I've got a golden spot. So I rushed out, set up my camera trap as quick as I possibly can. So excited. I'm going to be on the cover of every magazine in the country. So here I am setting it up. What you saw out in the lobby there, it is different in every location that I set it up. It really depends on what the spot has. So I'm typically going into the woods with about 60 pounds of gear, and that's a minimum. If I need a heavy chain or something like that, if there's people in the area that might steal the camera, it could be more. This is what it might look like in the end. Up in the upper left on the tree, you'll see that's the trail cam. Some of you might have those in your house up in the woods. And then down below is the camera trap with the photo. This is what it would look like if you're the animal walking on the trail. And just to be really clear here, what you're looking at is the infrared beam that you all crossed going into the other room, which triggers the camera, the photo camera, to take a photo of you. It's got a speed light. So I'm essentially making a studio in the forest. And then I've got that trail cam over to the side for video as research, and also just in case my camera fails, I want to know who came by. So here's another setup. And again, like I said, every location is a puzzle. And this is one thing that I just really love about this practice. It's like problem solving in the moment, in just to the extreme, 3D puzzling. Here's another setup. And they can take anywhere from 45 minutes to 6 hours to set up. And a huge part of that is testing. Is me just sorting out that everything works. And everything looks right. Is the light at the right angle, that it's not going to hurt the animal's eyes? Is it at the right power, that it's not going to completely blind them or blow them out in the photo? Yes. I feel like I'm missing something, but you guys can get it. So I spend a lot of time testing, and eventually I leave these out. That's what I was going to say. I leave these out for anywhere from a week to 2 weeks without checking them, but they can be out in the fields for a month or 3 months sometimes. But I check it just about every 2 weeks. So in order to do that, I stay with people like Dos Santos. I was lucky enough to be embedded with this group of park guards who wear many hats in between drinking their yerba mate tea. This is Carlos, an incredible camera trapper in his own right, and just animal tracker generally. So I got to spend a lot of time with these men, and like I said, they wear a lot of hats, men and women. They wear a lot of different hats, including working with tourists that come up. Like if you have a question for them, they might be able to guide you around the area a little bit. They do a lot of trail maintenance and park maintenance, but they also do a lot of anti-poaching work. And so that's what I was really interested in following with them. And I want to talk to you about 3 different types of anti-poaching that they did. Stuff in the forest, stuff on the water, and stuff on the road, work on the road. So like I said, these parks don't function in the same way that they do here. And poachers, typically, if they're going to enter into the park, the only way that they can get in is from the road. So a poacher would, for example, have their friend drop them off on the side of the road and dip into the woods. So we spend a lot of time walking on the side of the road looking for what could be a hole in the forest cover on the side. And like, for example, here he thinks he's found one. Javier thinks he's found one. And the only way to find out whether it was an animal or a person that made that hole in the forest cover is to follow the track. So we go into the woods off of the road and follow it and just see where it goes. And this is what we're hoping to find. This is the best case scenario. A jaguar and her cub walking side by side. And I just have one really interesting detail about these animals I just have to share. Predators, large cats like this, will walk in their own footprints. So what you're seeing is their front foot comes down, and then as it lifts up, their back foot steps into the same paw print. And we don't really know exactly, of course we don't know why exactly they do that, but I just think it's a fascinating trait. So this is what we're really hoping to find, but this is what we often find. And along with this kind of thing, we're finding salt traps and any manner of traps out in the forest. So salt traps like this, they take an old 2-liter bottle like this, and they'll drill holes in the top, put a bunch of salt in, and hang it up in a tree. And when the rain comes, it'll fall through the bottle, soak, and then poking holes in the bottom as well. So the water will fall through that salt and go onto the ground and kind of create a salt lick slowly over time. And then nearby that, typically, they build these kind of makeshift deer stands. Does anybody know what a deer stand is? Yeah. So you can buy them here. I'm sure you can buy them in Argentina too, but it's a lot easier to go into the woods, cut some vine, and make one for yourself. So in the back there, if you see that stick that's going across the frame, that's a ladder that they've built to go up to their deer stand. This is in front of the salt lick. You can see where the animals have dug out that spot. And so the poachers will come into the forest and then stake it out, be there for hours. Now, I'm not a hunter, obviously. That might be obvious by now. But I would love to speak with somebody, and if anyone here, please catch me at the bar afterward. I would love to know where the sport is in taking a rifle, waiting for hours, and baiting an animal. I'm all for sport. That doesn't seem very sporting to me. So obviously when we find them, we take them down. And GPS is really important for these people. Even some of the men and women that have worked here for decades, they need GPS to go around. The forest is changing constantly. We're fairly near the equator, and so things are growing and changing all the time. And I wouldn't say it's a featureless landscape, but it's fairly flat. So even for the people that know their way around, they need GPS to stay safe and to be able to get in and out of the forest, but obviously also to mark where they find these places so they can come back and stake them out later. But it's not just wildlife that people are after coming into the forest. This is a stand of palms that people have come into, and they've cut down an endangered species of palm for the palm hearts at the top. Something that they used to eat that you can sell as well. So the bugs, I could do a whole other talk just about the bugs, but I put this one in just to say that Carlos lit up when he told me that Misiones has 5 species of flies that bite. Just flies, by the way. There's other bugs that bite, but the flies were the one that got him excited. So if you've been reading about Argentina in the last couple of years, they are in fairly dire economic straits at this point. And it does seem like that could be shifting possibly, but time will tell. At the time that I was there, they were seeing about a 269% increase in inflation. And this was hitting even these provincial park guards. I went on many patrols with them, but we could have done many more. There were multiple times they told that we had planned a patrol and they couldn't go out because they didn't have gas. So on another day, out on the water, this is another type of patrol we went out on early one morning. Here we're looking for a different kind of activity. We're looking for things that people are doing in the water that they're not supposed to be doing. And I missed saying before, but there is no hunting in Misiones that's legal, just to be really clear. There is some fishing that's allowed, but it's very limited. And so what Dos Santos is doing here is dragging a metal pipe along the bottom of the lake floor, and he's hoping to catch a net. And so when he catches it, we stop the boat, and then he pulls it up. In this one day that we were out, one day that I was with them on the lake, we got 9 nets like this. And they'll string them from one side of the lake to the other. It's fairly thin sections of the lake there. Sometimes they have fish in them. Thankfully, most of the time they didn't. But these obviously are illegal. This is far beyond what you're allowed to do. You can pole fish with a single line, but nets are absolutely not allowed. So we pulled up 9, like I said, that day. The other thing that they see a lot of are these handmade boats. These are very cheap to make. They're made locally, and they are completely illegal. So when they find one, they jump in it, they paddle it to the other side of the river, and they destroy it. This one day that I was out with them, they got 5 of these boats on the river. So it almost feels like they're playing whack-a-mole with poaching in this place. It's like no matter how much they go out, they find something every single time, whether it's a person or their evidence of people. This guy, I wish I could remember his name, had an amazing eye, and he saw this boat from about 50 yards away. Someone had taken rocks, very clever, because they knew they weren't supposed to have it. They'd taken rocks and sunk it about 6 inches below the surface of the water. But he spotted it from about 50 yards away. We went over and, of course, destroyed it. These men and women are working day and night. It's nonstop. Whenever they get a call, they're out there. Sometimes they're the only people within miles with a chainsaw to clean up the road if a tree falls. And then they could be up the next day for a patrol at 6 a.m. that they had planned. It's amazing what they're able to do. I was constantly blown away. And this is the last type of patrol I want to show you with them, where we went out to a strategic point on the road, coming from the lake and from the forest back towards town. It's sort of a Y-shaped fork in the road. We spent a couple of nights there, but this is basically what one night would have looked like. There's me. So we're standing at that crossroads, and we're waiting for cars to come by. And we're stopping them and asking them to see what's in their trunk. So they unload, and we found a lot of this. This is above the allowable catch. Found a lot of nets in the backs of people's cars, things that they're just not allowed to have, and so they confiscate anything that they can find. This is an unknown mammal species. Don't know what it was. They obviously had a story, but only DNA analysis would tell us who that was. This is one night confiscated materials. So some of the key things here, obviously the pitchfork, the machete, they were out there in the forest doing something they probably shouldn't have been doing, but the gun is really the problem here. You can have a gun in Argentina, it is possible, but it's a lot more like Switzerland and less like the United States in terms of gun laws. You've got to have the right kind of permits, you have to be in the right area, and like I said, there is no hunting that's legal. So having a gun near the forest is grounds for being written up and arrested. So this young man that we found with the gun was arrested. And another interesting tidbit about the way things work down there is that when he was arrested, everything on him now belongs to the province of Misiones. They confiscated everything, including his motorcycle. And here he is again, up at 6 a.m. that next day. We took that young man to prison at about 4 a.m. that night, and then at about 6, they got a call that a motorcycle had entered the forest in a place he wasn't supposed to be. So here's Carlos loading his gun and about to head into the forest. It's just, like I said, it's just nonstop. But what about the camera traps? I spent weeks waiting, and it's like Christmas morning every time I get the opportunity to go out and check one of the traps. So I am usually amped when I get the chance to go out there. And in this case, this is what I found. This is 3,000 photos of nothing. This camera trap, in about 24 hours, had burned the batteries and totally filled up the SD card. And I don't really know why. It could have been the light hitting the sensor in the right way. Could have been something else, which we'll get to. But this is why I have the trail cam up. I wanted to see who walked by. Did I miss anything? In this case, I definitely did. This beautiful little ocelot. Ocelots are a keystone species in this area. They're probably the most common large cat. They're about twice the size of a house cat, if anybody is curious. And then this is that next morning, an agouti definitely smelling that ocelot. Agouti are a large rodent species. They're the main prey for a lot of the predators in this area. And they're also, unfortunately, commonly hunted by people for food. But this is one of the reasons that my camera might not have worked. A bug. Could have just been a bug that sat on the sensor and just triggered it. Like this beautiful moth decided to make a home there for a little while. So here's another system I came back to, and I checked the trail cam first on this one. And I found this video of a guy in a place that he's not really supposed to be in with a machete. And I noticed when he walked by, my camera didn't work, and that's what I found. So I took it back, and I showed it to one of the park guards I was working with, and he said, machete. For sure, it's a machete. It's been cut with a machete. And so I was pissed. So mad. I did everything I could to fix it there, but just ruining this guy's name the whole time. It never quite worked the same. But it was only a couple weeks later that I actually started watching all of the trail cam videos, and I found this really playful little agouti. And I'm like watching this guy on the left, like, what's he doing? Like, oh, wait a second. That's my cable. And he bit it in half. This shocked me. It shocked me. It shocked the park guards too. Nobody knew that their jaws were strong enough to bite through a third of an inch cable like that. So here's that location that I was so excited about. The 17 videos of jaguar and puma. Coming back to that location after several weeks out in the field. And this is one of my colleagues, one of the scientists came back up to help me check it.
Oh, yeah! All right.
It worked.
Well, it works.
Unfortunately, it's pretty much the only photo I got out of that trap. As you can see, looking at the trail cam video here, this ocelot came up and he's sniffing. He's really curious. And then he walks along the beam and he triggers it right up there. So I got a nice picture of his butt, but very little else. This is another thing that happens. It's a total crapshoot out there. It's a needle in a haystack, you might say. I just don't know what I'm going to get. I don't know why the jaguar and puma didn't come back to that area. They could have just moved on because their prey species went somewhere else. I don't know. I have no control over all this. All of this is chance. This is a tegu, a giant lizard species that lives here. Slipping under my beam, like pulling a 007 move, going under the infrared beam. So no photo of him. But here again, so this is another trap I was really excited about. And I was having a lot of trouble getting it to work. I spent several days trying to make it work in this location. And I thought maybe there were bugs coming. I thought maybe there was light. The light was reflecting off of water on the ground, so I kind of was doing everything I could to cover, like make a snoot basically over the sensor. But eventually, I couldn't get it to work. So eventually, on my birthday, the morning of my birthday, I went and took a book and sat in front of it for about 3 hours, just watching the sensor, trying to see if I could see what was going on. And I kind of got it to hobble along. I made like a series of fixes to the sensor to see if I could make it work. But I didn't have that long to test it, because not long after, I didn't know there were crickets here too. So not long after, the river nearby rose 15 feet in about 3 hours. And so by the time I got back to my camera, this is what it looked like. I had no idea how many ways there were to fail. At camera trapping, this was just an amazing experience. So I did get this photo before I pulled the camera out, which, by the way, that is the same camera that was using out there. So I was able to save that camera. Nikon pulled through. Here's a system that worked. So this is that agouti species. Beautiful little agouti got very surprised when he started hearing clicking over there. But this is an example of when it works. He walked into a space, he tripped the sensor, and it took a picture of him. And this deer, too. So this location, I got some photos, but these aren't exactly the kinds of photos I'm after. They're great, they work, but they're not thrilling. They're not something that connects me immediately to the animal. And so there's this is the second to last location I'm going to show you. I got back to the trail cam. I found this, the prehensile snout of a tapir, and this is the photo I was able to get there. So I got about 500 photos of tapir in this location. Tapir are herbivores. They're the largest herbivores. They're the largest prey species in this place. They're incredibly gentle and slow. They're kind of the size of a large pig, but they're relatives of the rhino, strangely enough. And like I said, I got like 500 photos of them. They kind of made this their own little red carpet, almost. Walked around and were showing off for me. And they even brought friends. This is an Argentine brown bat, unless somebody can correct me. I'm having a little trouble identifying, but. And then a rusty spotted owl. We knew this location would be fruitful because there were recent tracks, but it was also a watering hole, and who doesn't like water? So for those of you that are curious how the animals interact and whether or not they're scared by the lights or hurt by the lights, I just want to show you this. They could care less. It does depend on the species. So deer, really anywhere in the world that I've done this with deer, deer are terrified. The moment that something clicks, they are off. They're gone. But tapir didn't seem to care at all. And this is the photo that I got there. And here's just one more example, just to prove it. And that's the photo. I think Instagram's going to love that one. They're really friendly is not the right word. Like, you can approach, I don't recommend that you do, but you can approach tapir. They're just incredibly docile. And they do live mostly at night, or roam around mostly at night. So this is the last setup I'm going to show you. I built 3 camera traps to go down there. These are all custom built them myself, with components that I pieced together. And depending on the location, I moved them around. Sometimes if a location wasn't working, I'd move them around. That's why you see more than 3 locations here. And in this location, I was walking around in this private reserve, and I found a rabbit that had passed away. And I didn't see any obvious reasons that the rabbit had passed. There wasn't any sign of bloating or discoloration, like poison, anything like that. I didn't see any blood really or any marks. So what could have happened, the bet that I hedged, was that a large cat had come and broken her spine or killed her in some way quickly like that, and then left her, cached her, and was going to come back later. So I moved her just a little bit up the trail, just like 20 yards to this tree where I had a little bit better of a place to set up my trap. And I waited to see who would come. So this is that first night. And looking at these photos, I came back the next morning. The rabbit was still there, so I adjusted the lights. And the second night, the ocelot came back. She definitely outsmarted me, though. Here she is. You're going to see the photo that you just saw get taken right here. That's the picture you just saw. So she's smart. I think she's seeing, like, wait, if I go this way, something weird happens. And so she walked around. I was really hoping to get that shot of the rabbit in her mouth as she walked off. But she snuck her away before I could get her. But even after that rabbit was pulled away, other ocelot came to visit. So this location, I only needed to be set up there for about 4 nights, and I was able to get these photos. So this is all, I've already said, by chance. I'm really playing with chance. I can hedge my bets before I leave, but anything goes after I leave. And I want to show you one other way that I'm working that plays with chance in a similar way. The more time I spent down there and the more time I spent with these park guards and in this situation, in this fractured landscape, I felt that documentary photos, like everything you've seen, were just not quite capturing the complexity and the soul of what I was seeing, what I was witnessing. So I decided to take this new practice that I've been experimenting with, playing with. A lot of what you saw in the anti-poaching work is all shot on film, and I developed my own film. So here I am on location in a field site, getting those rolls of film into a dark tank, putting them in a dark bag, getting them into a dark tank. Have any of you ever developed film? Anybody here? Yeah, so you know somewhat the process then. So I'm putting it all, getting it ready to be developed. But with this process, I wanted to try this experiment that I've been doing, where I gathered rainwater and leaves and flowers and seeds from the parks that I've been working in, from these places. And I boil them and make this kind of like dark tea. And the first thing that really appealed to me about working this way is that it's non-toxic. Different than the kind of store-bought developers that you can buy at a camera shop. This, theoretically, doesn't harm anyone. So that's what drew me to it. But then the more I started working with it, the more it really appealed to me that I was inviting the landscape in, inviting the landscape to be a part of its own story in a way. And what's amazing to me is that it works sometimes. This is $20 worth of film down the drain. I don't know why this didn't work, but again, a lot like the camera traps, every time is an experiment. Every batch is totally different. So when it does work, though, this is what it would look like coming out of that dark tank. This is some portraits of the park guards, and then I'm able to piece them together like this. So this is Mario. Mario's a private park guard, works on a private reserve that was set up to protect the area, the section of the river that he's in. And again, about the process here, something that is really appeals to me as I play with this technique is the artifacts that it's leaving on the negatives. They're leaving little traces of where the plants have slept on this during the development process, on the negative itself. And I like that. I like when it gets a little messed up. But it's not always. Like this one with Lorena, it's almost a perfect development. I'm not trying to, I'm trying to mess it up, and it doesn't always work. Lorena's the head of all of the park guards in the northern sector of Misiones. This is San Juan. San Juan has worked in the park guards with the park system for over 40 years. And he doesn't do as much of the trudging through the forest anymore. He does a lot more of the driving for the park guards, but he seems very happy with that. And when he's not working as a park guard, he's a secretary for his local governor, or mayor, sorry. This is Delphi. Delphi just finished her PhD, so she is now Dr. Delfina. And she's done a lot of the population studies over the last several years so that we know how many of these animals they have actually in Misiones. So she and her team have done a lot of the heavy lifting in that. I developed hers with yerba mate, if any of you have ever had yerba mate. And here again, I just love that the yerba decided the contrast for me. It really made it so much moodier than I was expecting that to become. This is Marcelo. Marcelo has been a part of the anti-poaching unit since its founding, and he really comes alive on the patrols. He'll be sitting around smoking cigarettes at the field station, and then we get into the woods, and he becomes a dog. He's just incredible to watch. This is Nair. Nair works in a field station fairly remote in the eastern part of the state where there's really no tourism. If any of you have been to Misiones, it's probably because you went to Iguazu Falls. Very few people, very few tourists, international tourists, go anywhere else in the state. So I asked her if she's ever lonely out there, because it's pretty quiet. And she said no, she actually likes it quite a bit because it's mostly young school groups that come by. And she really likes translating what is so important about this forest and why it's worth protecting for herself and for the generations to come. And I'm choosing to end here with Dr. Miguel Riñas. Dr. Riñas was one of the founding members of the Ministry of Ecology in Misiones. Misiones province is the only province in Argentina that has a Ministry of Ecology because they need one. He has worked in conservation for more than 50 years. And I really hope that I can have the longevity and the tenacity that he's shown over the years. Since he left the Ministry of Ecology, he's working harder than ever now in nonprofit in conservation in Misiones. But I have to say, I have to be honest with you, that I am often and deeply discouraged by all of the things that I am seeing around the world, at home and around the world. I am not by any means the first person to photograph these same animals in Misiones. I am by no means the first conservation storyteller to talk about conservation in the world. And still, in 2 years before I arrived to Misiones, they saw a 40% decline in predators like this baby ocelot here, and jaguar, and puma. In that same time span, they saw a 47% decline in prey species like tapir, coati, and agouti. And we could talk for years about this. This is not a story about 1% of 2.5% of our entire planet. This is not, this story is being replicated all over the world. And it's not just about saving these animals or this place. This is a story about saving what we need to save, not just for them, but for all of us. If we don't, it really doesn't matter who you are or where you feel called. There is something that all of us can do, and we have to do it now. I really worry how many birthdays I'm going to have sharing a planet with all these incredible animals. And I hope that you'll join me and do everything that you can to protect the places that you love. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Back here.
Thank you so much for that powerful presentation. I was wondering, you talked about the cat and mouse game between the park guards and the hunters. Are you aware of like any kind of broader like policy discussions or incentives to kind of break that cycle? Are there any things that, you know, economically we could incentivize people to not hunt for those animals?
Yeah, there are many things that I may not be aware of, but first and foremost, the scientists that I'm working with have started a coalition working one-on-one with landowners, and they're using tax incentives that the government has allowed them. I don't know how to say that. They're in partnership with the local government to give tax incentives to people that agree to not hunt the animals. So that is one way, for sure. And you know, other than that, it's staying on top of it is really the only way. Right before I left, someone had hunted a monkey, which is in a protected species. Totally, everything is illegal, but that is like serious jail time. And I think they take opportunities like that to advertise that, like that this person was caught, that they're out there. So I think that's something that they're trying to implement right now is just making it more known that you can't just get away with it. But in terms of government incentives, I think that's what they're looking for. And implementing those things is very difficult. I know I'm kind of dancing around your answer, but scientists and conservation groups are working with the government to sort that out right now. Yeah, in this place. Yeah.
For your work, did you find any? Okay, thank you. For your work and also for the conservation efforts, are there any challenges with being, I guess, what's called the triple frontier? Because I mean, you can see you're surrounded by other countries there. It's kind of a peninsula.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Can you clarify a little bit what you mean, like by?
Well, both I mean, were there any challenges? The fact you got Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay that kind of surround Misiones, and I believe the area is referred to as the triple frontier.
Right. The primary issue that I'm aware of really is that the animals are being pushed out of those places because if you remember from the map, and you can look it up on Google Maps as well, Misiones is fairly green. Everything else around it is a much duller green. And that's mostly because it's agricultural. It's been turned into other sort of farms. And so I think that's a major pressure that's happening in Misiones. It's a major problem between those places, is that there's different regulations around. And so a lot of the animals that would be all over there are being kind of forced to come into Misiones. There are certainly governmental collaborations there between the governments. I'm aware of one where they're trying to bring some species from Brazil across the border because there's just not enough forest to support them in Brazil anymore right across the border. But honestly, that's a little bit outside of my scope, unfortunately, to really talk about that in depth.
Hi, Thomas.
Hey.
Hi, I had two questions for you. One was more about the geography, and then the second one will be more about your photographic practice. So you mentioned that 50% of Misiones is national park, and then the other 50% is split between industry and privately owned land. So what exactly is the privately owned land? Is it farmers? Is it just people who own land and perhaps build houses? And then what authority do those people have to protect the land? One of the rangers you showed us a photograph of, you said was a private ranger. So do they have any kind of authority to, you know, not really arrest people, but perhaps pass them on to national authority or kick them out? And then the second question, which was about your photographic practice, was why did you decide to fragment the portraits in the way that you did?
I'll answer that one first because it's easier. Fragmenting the portraits was an impulse first, and I couldn't have told you that the first one I did. I was like, I don't know, I just something I want to try. And then looking at it, I felt that it represented more accurately the fractured nature of the landscape that the people were working in. So what appealed to me as I moved through that series was seeing reflected on the person that fragmented forest. In terms of the geography, to be really clear, it is 50% of Misiones is forested, but only 50% of that forested section is protected. So there's one national park, and there's many provincial parks. On the land in between, all of that private land, it is open to agriculture, but it's a mix. It's towns, it's small farms, small holdings. Some of it is major industry. The video from the very beginning of the eucalyptus and pine, I think, if I remember correctly, that is 60,000 hectares, something like that. We drove for 2 hours, and we're still inside of the plantation. So they collaborate fairly heavily with the park guards. Park guards will do patrols in those eucalyptus and pine plantations because poachers go in there as well. So in terms of what authority the park guards have, they rely on goodwill with the private landowners in terms of their authority to arrest people on the land, like I said, in that private pine plantation, where we did patrols and they actually chased someone. We found someone in where they shouldn't be, and because of the goodwill that they've created with that landowner, with that company, they're able to go in there and arrest. But again, we're relying on goodwill with the smaller holders and just hoping that they won't cut down all of their trees, or that if they do that in collaboration with some some governing body that can guide them in a way that does it sustainably is not the right word, but in a way that would allow animals to use it still. So, like, again, back to the question about his authority. He is a private. He was trained by the province to be a park guard, but now he's hired privately by a international nonprofit. So they have. That's another way that people hold land there. That's technically private, but there are some small holdings like that. Might be a couple thousand hectares that belong to a subsidiary of WWF, for example. And so they're protecting that landscape, and obviously we can trust that they're not going to cut down the trees or killing animals there. But by and large, it is local people, it's agriculture, and so we're just hoping and praying that if we talk to them and show them beautiful photos of ocelot and tapir, that they will buy into the program and sign on. Yes, Bonnie, in the back. Oh.
Hi, I don't actually have a question. I have to leave, so I just wanted to say something. I saw Gita and Kartik in Washington last month, and they're going to be here at the Explorers Club next March. So for maybe a hybrid event.
Man,
So
I would love to hug you all here. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. I just had a quick question, sort of related to what you mentioned at the beginning about how we define and label biodiversity hotspots. So you mentioned that there's a level of endemic species, and then there's also a level of degradation that needs to be seen. So sort of a twofold question. One, do you think that labeling areas sooner would be something that gets people involved faster, and sort of, obviously we have, high levels of degradation that are happening, but also sort of increasing focus on areas that maybe aren't seeing that to get people involved sooner? And then I was also curious if a label as a biodiversity hotspot or an area that's worth protecting has also seen more of an increase in poaching or economic activity that's causing degradation as well. I don't know if that made sense. I can rephrase it.
Hold on to the mic because I might have you. But yeah. The first thing I want to say is that in order to be a biodiversity hotspot, it has already seen quite a bit of degradation. Help me get at so in terms of naming biodiversity hotspot, I think that is actually where the term came from. I'm going to mess it up if I try to name who. I think it was Conservation International that came up with the concept. And I think that was their whole idea is, okay, we're watching places just like crash. And so what if we give them a special designation, and will that help? So I think we're seeing, your question is a very good one, and I think that we're seeing that play out right now in real time. It's a fairly recent concept. And so I don't know. I think time will tell whether or not it being labeled and being sort of called out as an incredibly important place wherever it may be all over the world, will help. I believe it will, because it will help draw attention to that place. But again, if you look at the map again, I'm not going to go all the way back. But if you look at the map of where they are incredibly populated areas. I mean, LA is in the middle of a biodiversity hotspot, if I'm not wrong. So I think calling attention to it is the first thing. Being aware of where it is the first thing, and I think we're still in that step. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. So in terms of like level of endemic species that aren't necessarily categorized as biodiversity hotspots, are there still places like that exist that are worth labeling as almost like sort of pre that process? Or
yes.
What does that look like
yes.
right now?
Yeah, and so for example, like the Amazon, you notice was not really like in the biodiversity hotspots. They luckily they don't have to be classified that way because they haven't lost 70%. So for example, the Amazon, there's major threats there, but I don't know the percentage of what they've lost to date. So yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you so much. Your work is really important.
Thank you.
I was so excited to see you shoot on film. I shoot on film as well.
Hey, nice, yeah.
So I would love to know like details on what film you use and in the development process, if there were certain plants or different things that worked better than others. So yeah, just a little detail on that.
Yeah, yeah. So I've been doing the experiment a lot with flowers. That's where I started, and flowers work really well. I last week developed with goldenrod and rhododendron flowers, and it really depends on each flowers. Like I said, each batch is completely different, and so each ones have different effects. Some I have to develop for longer, or some less. I've been playing with grass and leaves. Most of the stuff from Misiones is leaves. Because that's what there were. They're just, while in the months that I was there weren't that many flowers that I found enough of that I felt I could reasonably take. So I took leaves. I made sure that they weren't, just a note, I forgot to say this, I made sure that they weren't endangered. Talked to the park guards, and they helped me make sure that they're common plants. So it's just, yeah, each time has been an experiment, and with a lot of failure and a lot of trying, like, well, what if I develop it longer? Like the leaves, for example, is a much weaker solution than the flowers. So I need a longer developing time for a leaf extract than I would a flower extract. But it is a blast. It's really fun. And I'm happy to talk at the bar later about that. I could talk about that all night. Any last questions? Yeah.
Yes, I was wondering, what would you say was the most challenging aspect to your journey? And as well, second question would be, what your first thought of, what do you think of since your trip? What is the first thought that comes to your mind when someone brings up Misiones?
When someone brings up Misiones? Yeah. The quiet. I think so many of the places that I was in are just deeply quiet. And in the right kind of way, where like it's a cacophony of birds and bugs and stuff that sound, but I think there's a different feeling in a forest like that. And it has been, much of that forest has been cut already. It's a second growth forest, like a lot of what we have in the United States. But it regrows so quickly that I think it has the feeling of old growth, even though it's not. And so I think the first thing that comes to mind is just that, like, there's like a deep calm that comes from being in a place like that. And you can feel it in the people that you interact with for the most part. I mean, the park guards that I worked with are very chill people, very little that they complain about. And the biggest challenge, I think the biggest challenge is always myself, is like getting over myself. Like when the seventh time I come back to the trap and it's still not working, not just screaming and kicking it. You know, I think the biggest challenge is staying calm and remembering that it's just a piece of equipment that I can try some new configuration and make it work. Because I love this way of working, but it is incredibly challenging. There are so many little parts that can stop for any number of reasons. So that was a huge challenge. But I think outside of the photo work, I think that I learned down there that I don't thrive in very hot environments. Had a great time, and I can't wait to go back. But I think that I learned that I really like some cold. It's just so hot and humid all the time, and there's so many bugs. I think I was getting fairly frustrated by the end of my time there. Like, I'm just ready to stop, like, smacking. Like, this becomes a kind of a secondary reflex, like swat flies. So that was a bit of a challenge, but one that's well worth taking, I think. Yeah. Let's see. I think they want to make sure that people online can hear the question.
I'm a huge fan of your film, The King's Keeper.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is it available for people to see it?
Yeah, it's online. The King's Keeper is online. You can watch it through the Mountain Film Festival. You can see it on YouTube. I believe Wildlife SOS has posted it on YouTube, and I have it on Vimeo. So if you'd like to email me, I'm happy to give you my email after this, and I can send it to you, or we can find it online.
Worth watching, everybody.
Thank you.
Maybe one or two more?
Yeah.
That was amazing. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you.
My question is, are there any efforts to rewild Misiones, reintroduce species that might have been lost or about to be being lost?
Yeah, there's one, I am blanking on the name right now, but there's a monkey that I was just talking about that they're trying to bring back. There's very, very, very few of them in Misiones. And it seemed to prefer the other side of the river in Brazil, but that forest is going down. There's very, very, very little of that forest left. So some of the scientists I'm working with are involved in that effort, and that is a reason I hope to go back down there, is to document the transportation of a group of those monkeys over to Misiones where they would have forest. So yes, that's one effort that I'm aware of. Another challenge, though, in that area is deer. There's a invasive species of deer that has gotten out of a hunting range and has made it up to Misiones, and they are incredibly hard to control. So there's kind of both ends. Like there's some rewilding happening, quote unquote, naturally, and then there's species that they are trying to bring back. But unfortunately, all of that stuff is very slow and takes a lot of time. I'm not aware of any other species that they're working on right now because that international collaboration is tough. Yeah.
Last question.
Thank you. Going back to the picture of the safaris chasing the tiger, what do you think the role of ecotourism is in incentivizing protection, conservation, and protecting the natural world, and how can this be applied to Misiones?
I think the first and most important role that kind of stuff can serve is education. So when any of us go to a place like that, learning about it. And going on safari is an amazing way to learn about the place. So I'm not here to say that safari's bad. That is not the message here. I do think that by learning about that place, you can learn to care about it. There's really no other way to deeply care about a place, I think. So I hope that you do that. And I do think that there's a way to do that where you are maintaining a reasonable distance. For example, if any of you have ever been whale watching, any whale watching agency worth their salt around the world, they have strict international laws about how close they can get to a whale and how and when they can have their engines on and that sort of thing. So I think it's up to you to do the research and make sure that you are going somewhere where they are working with integrity. And unfortunately, that can be a lot of work on your side to make sure that they are actually vetted by the right kinds of people. But it's well worth doing before you go to that place, ensuring that that safari company is working ethically. And if they do, education is probably a huge part of what they're doing out there, is teaching you about those animals. And I hope that you do learn about them. I hope that you do go to these amazing places and see these animals. And I hope that you see them through binoculars. I think that's what we all need to be doing. Yeah. I did see one question over here consistently, just so one last one. And I'll be hanging out for a bit afterward. I would love to talk. Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
All right. So maybe this might be a good one to end on. But where would you like to go next if you could choose anywhere?
Home. Yeah, I'll just say something really brief about that. I am working on a grant proposal right now to work with an endemic species of salamander in my hometown. So I don't quite know how I'm going to photograph them yet. So I'm getting chills right now because it's a new frontier. I hope to mix kind of all of the things that you saw, but I don't know. And so, dream of dreams, 2 years from now, I'm talking about a species in my backyard. Man, thank you all.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.